Fall is all about cozy comforts, and with Hero Bread, you can enjoy all your favorites and still hit your health goals. From breakfast bagels and meal prepped enchiladas to mouth-watering burgers and cheesy noodles. You won't believe Hero Bread's options have 0 to 5 grams net carbs and are high fiber from the taste and texture. And right now, Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. Go to hero.co and use code FALL25 at checkout. That's FALL25 at HERO.co. All figures are per serving of Hero Bread. Contains 2 to 18 grams of fat per serving. See the product nutrition panels on hero.co for more information.
Thanks for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast series, where we profile those who have overcome or those who are in the process of overcoming any type of life topic. We have 3 objectives with this podcast series. Our first objective is we want you to know that you're not alone in whatever it is you are experiencing in life, whatever situation you are encountering. We are here to work with you, help you think into it, and help you overcome whatever challenge you're enduring. You are not alone. We're in this together. Our second objective is to help you develop a resolve to know that there are multiple solutions to any life challenge you may be enduring. That may be difficult to totally accept, but there actually are multiple solutions to any life challenge, any dilemma you are experiencing. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are experiencing a life situation that's a result of a decision sometime in the past that if you had a life redo, you would make a different decision, we want to help you with those critical thinking skills such that we can help you more thoroughly and objectively assess all the facts and factors that are involved in making a very informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture, and the Cooper Culture is sponsoring this podcast series. Today, we feature Pastor Bryan Lloyd, who explains his life of having overcome a life of substance abuse and his addiction to drugs and succumbing to a drug disease. Marty, what are some takeaways for our listeners?
Ron, this was a great podcast. We talk about drug addiction, but Pastor brought to light there are many addictions people have. I love to shop. Some people love to shop because it makes them feel better, so there's a deeper issue there. This was very enlightening.
Listen to Pastor Lloyd and what he explains as the substance abuse being a symptom of a larger problem. He talks about shrinking the world of those who are engaged in this, and he is very articulate in describing our need to those of us on the outside who need to be discerning of what is helpful to the person who's engaged in this type of addictive behavior versus exercising tough love. We need to be discerning in what that difference is. As we are discerning, we can help a person overcome sooner rather than later any of this addictive behavior. Let's listen together for a very insightful podcast. Pastor Bryan, thank you for joining us on our podcast series. I know a little bit of your background, but I think our listeners would be very interested in just a brief summary of your background, where you've been, and how you have overcome some of your past, and more importantly, what you're doing right now. So, Pastor, would you be willing to share just a little bit of your past?
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all you do helping people overcome. It's a much-needed thing in this time that we're in, for sure. I was like most kids growing up on the Eastern Shore, grew up, had a good life. My parents were divorced at an early age, although they had a great relationship. But it was me and Mom kind of lived together, and Mom was always working to make sure we had what we need, and we always had a pretty good life. I didn't know at the time, but today I do. I didn't realize the importance of having Dad in life. I would figure that out later on in my story, as I'll share, but I got to see my dad kind of every other weekend. He lived up, a couple hours away from us. Something during my teenage years, I never had a clear sense of identity, who I was, and again, I think that was a boy needs his dad telling him, good job, son, or this is what's right, son, or this is what's wrong, son. And while my mom did that, it's real hard for mom to be dad, who they're created to be, although mom had no problem laying down the law like a dad would either. But, growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends. I always tried to fit in and never felt like I could. A couple close friends, but just, we were all kind of the same. We were a little bit of loners and really didn't have a whole lot of direction in life. And what ended up happening is through that, of not having identity, not knowing who I was or even who God was and what God had planned for me, I started making choices that later would not be good for me. I wanted to have material things because I thought if I had material things, then I would amount to something and people would like me and they would think I was cool. That ultimately didn't change a whole lot for me. It didn't result in a lot of things. So I constantly were looking for things. And eventually, a lot of my family, cousins, were selling drugs. And I thought, well, man, that looks pretty exciting. And they seem to be very confident. They have an exciting life, do the things that they want to do. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try that. And that's what I ended up doing. And for a long time, that's where I found my identity, was in selling drugs. I started selling marijuana, and then that wasn't enough because what I did know at the time is that God had put an entrepreneurial spirit in my life, and I was just using it for the wrong things. And I continued to want to be successful in that horrible business. And I eventually started selling cocaine and ran cocaine from New York to Salisbury and was doing that and thought, I finally arrived. I know what I'm called to be. I'm called to be a drug dealer. And you just think of the insanity of that. But that's where I was and liked it and thought that made sense. It gave me what I thought at the time, a sense of purpose, sense of identity. And then and people wanted to be my friends, and people respected me. And I thought, man, this is what it's all about. And of course, that was not true. That was a lie. But it felt right at the time. And eventually, that wasn't enough either. I still had this emptiness. I had this sense of, man, I'm missing something. And then eventually, to deal with that emptiness and that pain, I started using drugs. I never used drugs really in any great way when I was selling drugs, but I started selling heroin because the money was greater in heroin than it was even in cocaine. And I realized I really liked heroin. I loved the feeling that it gave me. That's when addiction really showed itself. Now, I would tell you today that those addictive behaviors were there early on. I just didn't know what to call it. I just thought I got to keep trying to do something until I figure out what I'm supposed to do. But once I tried heroin, fell in love with it. It talk about in recovery, that kind of dragon is awakened. And it was awakened. And from that point on, my life really spiraled out of control. I was with my wife, who I'm with now, Heather, my wife, for 29 years. That alone just tells me that there's a God, because she stayed with me through all of that. But it just ruined everything. I lost some businesses at that time, lost all of them, and I almost lost my family as a result. And then finally, my wife had enough. She said, hey, you got to pick it or me. By the grace of God, I picked her. And that's all I knew to do at the time. I couldn't even think of myself, but I knew I didn't want to lose her. Went into a drugs treatment center, and it was the first time that I realized I needed to surrender my life and my will. And I was trying to do it my way. And as I looked around at my life and the destruction that I created, my way wasn't working. And I surrendered in that drug treatment facility. I actually was in the treatment facility, and they were bringing drugs in there. And I wanted to do them. A guy asked me, he said, do you want to do some drugs we're bringing in here tonight? And I felt like crap. So I thought, well, yeah, that'll make me feel a little better. But just something came over me, and I went back to my room, and I prayed because I saw my dad pray. My dad was very much involved in church, and when I saw him, we were always in church. And man, they were a praying people. They were Pentecostal, my dad was, and the church he went to. And one thing I learned is, man, they just believed you could pray. So I got on my knees and prayed, and I said, God, I don't want to do this, but my body does. And I prayed that prayer, that simple prayer. That was my prayer. I'll never forget it. And all of those guys that were coming in that day, because they let you go on work release at that treatment center, and they came in with the drugs, and they were all busted. They were stopped at the door, and they were searched, and they had it on them, and they were all thrown out. And that wasn't a coincidence for me. That was a God moment for me. I went back to that's in my room, got back on my knees again, and I said, God, I don't believe that was an accident. I believe you heard my prayer. I want to surrender my life to you. I did that, everything changed. It really did. I mean, I was glad to be in that treatment facility. I came home and I really started following God. And that was the turning point for me. For people listening, they may be a Christian or a Jesus follower. Either way, what is the common thread for me and for anybody that I've talked to that's overcome addiction is you get to a point of surrender. And you realize that I can't do this anymore and I can't do it my way because my way hasn't been working. From that point on, my life was just dramatically different. I started to learn who I was in Christ, and that gave me the sense of purpose that I had been looking for all this time. You know, I learned who God said I was and how he felt about me, that he loved me, that he cared for me, and that he had a plan for me. And man, all along for all those years, that's what really I was looking for. I didn't know it, but that's what I was looking for. And it just put my life on a different trajectory. From that point going forward, my marriage was restored. My relationship with my girls, I have 2 daughters, Mallory and Zoe, and now I have 2 granddaughters. My relationship with them was restored. Life just took on a different approach from that point on. I think for those listening, that's the one thing we struggle with as addicts. Addiction looks different for everybody. For me, it was heroin. For some people, it's pornography. For some people, it's overeating. For some people, it's over shopping. You know, they have a shopping addiction or a gambling addiction. We say in recovery, the 12-step program I'm part of, that drugs was not my problem. It was a symptom of a deeper problem. And that deeper issue is self-centeredness. I wanted what I wanted and had this brokenness, and I would do whatever I could do that made me feel good about it. And I think that's a key takeaway. Even anybody who's listening who has a loved one or a friend who's until that person with that addictive behavior gets to a point of surrender. And that's different for a lot of people. It took me losing everything and potentially losing my wife for me to get to rock bottom. But that's the key to change. And I think in any area in life, whether it's health or whatever, you know, you have to be willing to surrender. You have to be willing to recognize that, hey, where I'm at is not good. And something's got to change. The problem is it took me about 6 years to get to that point, Ron. And many people don't get there, or they get there by dying, unfortunately, especially drug addiction. I've lost so many friends because, quite honestly, the only time they got to surrender was when they died. Their addiction took them to death, and that's what finally caused them to give up because they just weren't willing to. Surrender's a key piece. Through that, it's great for those that are struggling with addiction. And, you know, I couldn't see this at the time. When you're in the midst of it, it's so hard for you to see what could be. You're just in the grips of it. All you can think about is the next day or even that day. In my life, Ron, I had to get up in the morning making sure I had heroin. I went to bed at night and had 2 thoughts. I've got some for the morning, which really rarely ever happen, and I'll be okay in the morning, or, man, I've got to find a way to get some in the morning. And what a horrible way to live, but that's where addiction takes you, and it takes you constantly thinking about the next fix, whatever that may be. And what a horrible life. But at the time, you can't see what could be. We talk about in recovery that we have this awakening. When you're ready to surrender, you know, you'll have an awakening that I've got to make some changes. And then once you surrender that, you know, you start making changes in your life that will help you see what could be in life. And I think that's key. You've got to make changes in life to be able to see what could be in life. So that, you know, that's kind of where I was. I don't know. I hope that's helpful to people and where I've been. And, you know, there's this pivot point when you get to that point, man, that life really changes. And it did for me. I got to tell you, you know, it wasn't instantly, but, man, over the next year, my life incrementally got better. I continued to build a relationship with God, which I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for God, and my recovery program. I still work a very earnest recovery program. I'm part of a 12-step program. I have a sponsor. I do step work because I believe God gave me that program. God's got one way. You know, I think everything that's good for you comes from God, and God put me in a 12-step program that helped me and changed my life. And now today, because I'm still in that program, I get to help people and serve people that are struggling with addiction. And, man, I just love that because that's The other thing that's important for those that struggle with it, the disease of addiction is self-centeredness. So for me to be able to continue to serve people and help other people, I tell you what that does. That always keeps a healthy balance for me not to make it about me. Because if I make it about me, Ron, I'll go back to doing some of the stupid things that I used to do. Because today I don't get up thinking, oh man, I wish I had some heroin. But I still get up thinking, man, I want to make it about me, and this would be good for me, and I should do this. And I always balance how many I's are in the statements when I'm talking. So now I get this opportunity to serve others, and that is so key. The healing power of serving others is just life-changing, and it constantly, helps me, like I said, not make it about me.
Thank you for being so transparent with us. That is very meaningful. 3 or 4 points really come to mind. I want to take you back mentally to the inception of you and before you ever got indulged in this. What I took of what you said is you had what I categorize as an overpowering need for acceptance and to have friends, identity, and the like. And you found that, it seems, in those who were dealing in drugs. Can you categorize that as somewhat the inception?
Yes. Listen, I'm not a professional in this field, but everybody that I talk to, and I hang around with a lot of people with addictive behaviors that are like me, that are doing good, and people that are still in the grips of it because I like to help them. That everyone was looking for this need of acceptance. There's this other common thread, not always, is a lot of times dad wasn't around, or if dad was around, he was very militant, very highly structured, and that you never had a great relationship with their dads. So there's this common thread that for whatever reason we're looking for that acceptance and identity. And and I found it in that. I found this family, so to speak, within people that I sold drugs with, and because everybody wanted to be part of it, because you made a lot of money, so we created a group, we created a small little family, and we thought we had this acceptance of each other there. That's why a lot of people get in gangs, looking for acceptance. They're looking for friendship. I think that's definitely the common thread in that.
And another very important point is your dad. And I'm perceiving what you're saying, and I want to be very careful not to unjustly denigrate your dad. That is not my point. But rather, toward the end of this, I'd like to ask you if we identified or we had in our presence a person who exhibits virtually everything you just said. We just sense they have a need for acceptance, identity. They feel alone. They're not real sure where they fit. Their dad is not active in their life, and I'm talking specifically now to the male figure, and for the women, maybe the comparable is their mother. But these, it seems, and tell me if I'm wrong, I need to clarify that Marty and I are consummate outsiders. We have never indulged in drugs. We never had the desire or taste for it. However, if we were to observe this kind of characteristics of a person you're describing, could it be helpful to try to intervene early enough in this person's life without labeling, without providing a stigma or something of that nature? And I guess I'm asking you, Pastor, if someone, a mentor, someone very meaningful to you, had engaged earlier in your life, do you think there was a possibility you could have avoided the addiction that you just described?
Great question. And let me just say this. First of all, Dad was a great dad. He just wasn't around because my parents weren't together and he lived out of state. And one of the greatest things my dad gave me was for my relationship with Jesus, because he helped me understand who Jesus was. To your point, absolutely. If I had a mentor, that would have been helpful for sure. I believe in the disease of addiction, so I think that it was going to be there one way or the other. But what a mentor would have helped, I think about a guy, as you were talking about, had a coach at the Salvation Army who would have wonderfully been that person and wanted to be that person. Again, I wasn't willing to listen to him, though. That was the thing. But could I have had a male figure in my life that would help guide me and say, hey, this is where you go? And would that have helped me make better decisions? Absolutely. And I think that's key, for single moms out there who are listening. helping your child have a role model or a mentor, not that mom can't be, but I just believe personally that there's something powerful about a male figure in a male's life. And so, yeah, I think if you're there, man, get a kid involved with a youth group at church. Get a kid involved with sports and athletics where he can see a coach and that maybe would take him under the wing. And that's what's great about youth programs, whether they're in church or in clubs in town. There's usually a man there that really wants to put into kids, oftentimes because he had the story that I did, and he feels just like I do, a passion to put into people. So, yes, I think they would have possibly helped me make better decisions and maybe understand healthy boundaries and right and wrong a little better. I was just kind of left to make my own decisions. But I believe I will struggle until the day I die with addictive thoughts and behaviors. But here's the difference today. I don't act on them the way that I did before I had God in my life and before I had a recovery program. So I still have the thoughts. It shows itself more like in eating. Like, I can't eat one Oreo, Ron. I eat 20. And so that reminds me of that addictive behavior. So I think I will always kind of wrestle with that. It doesn't own me anymore. That's where the overcoming part has come. I've overcome the need to act on those thoughts. Okay, I don't have to be impulsive anymore because, again, I have a relationship with God and I have a strong recovery program. And I often tell people this. I have two guardrails in my life, and you know this, and your listeners do. When you think of a guardrail, you think, what do? Well, they keep you from running off the road, and they keep you safe. They keep you in your lane. And I have two guardrails. One is God, and one is recovery. As long as I keep those guardrails on my sides, I don't think I ever have to go off my lane again. And they help me make better decisions and not act on those bad thoughts. I have a life of prayer and Bible study. And again, as I said, I work the 12 steps in a 12-step program. And those two have just been transformative and continue to help me overcome some of my stinking thinking, as we talk about, Ron. So I hope that answered your question there.
No, that's great. I want to address just a couple other factors. Your dad was a very positive influence in leading you to the Lord, prayer, and to what seems to be take a very introspective look at your life. The other part to this is certainly your wife, but am I hearing you correctly that you were at a rock bottom, as you explained, but did it take nearly 6 years for you to come out of the rock bottom to where you are? And then you're very descriptive in saying you're always going to, I'm not sure if it's deal with or be aware of your addictive past.
Yeah, my wife was also, my dad gave me my Jesus. My wife helped me be like him because she said, you got to make some better choices or I'm out of here, because she was just so frustrated with me. I've used her in that way. One of the things that addicts need, and this is another note for your listeners or anybody who's struggling with an addictive spouse or a loved one or child or family member, is we need to be told what to do and we need consequences of our decisions. So what my wife did with that statement when she said, you need to pick it or me now, she gave me a consequence. She said, if you're going to keep doing this, we're not going to be together. And that's what I have seen that ultimately changes the addict. When they see a consequence of their decision, hey, if I keep doing this, I'm going to lose this, that's the motivation to often change. But yes, I used for 6 years before I got to that place of surrender. It took me that long for me. Part of my other story is I was very successful in business later in life. So it allowed me to fuel that addiction in a way that I was able to maintain it for a lot longer than most people because I had successful businesses before I lost them all. But she was instrumental, and yes, it took me 6 years to get to that point where I really could finally agree that, man, life had fallen apart all around me. And so I want to encourage everybody, don't wait 6 years. Realize it's going to fall down around you, but that's what it took. That's what it took for me.
Two things I want to address. One would seem to be for those of us who have loved ones within our sphere of influence, understand that it's a process to go from rock bottom to recovery. And I think what you're saying, Pastor, and this is what I'm reading into it, albeit you did not apparently use these words, please stay with me so that I know you're on the other side, the good side, the high side, such that when I come out of this, I know I've got you there to rely on and partner with me. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. I tell families all the time, because they say, hey, what do I do? Well, one, you continually be a lifeline for the person you care about that's struggling with this. You let them know you love them, you care for them, and I'll be here for you when you're ready to make the right decisions. One of the things I'll say is this is Heather, and families don't know how to do this because you love the people you're around. Had she gave me that ultimatum sooner, I may not have stayed there that long. But here's what ends up happening. Family members become codependent who have addictive behaviors. They become people pleasers and they become enablers. So we continue to, as family members, because I have a daughter who's in recovery, although she's been clean for 7 years, thank God. But we'll enable the behavior because we'll allow them to continue to do it. And I always tell family members, yes, you tell them you'll be there. I'm a lifeline for you. I love you. I care about you. But I will not support what you're doing. And the moment you're ready to change, you call me. If someone needs food or something like that, man, you support them with that. But family members and friends actually have way more power over people with addictive behaviors than they realize. Because ultimately, like I told you, I didn't want to lose my wife. I didn't want to lose my mom. And they both were going to write me off. I can't support this anymore. And once they said that, I said, I can't lose them and I'll change. So love them, be a lifeline. But I tell people all the time, hey, you got to shrink their world. And you got to give them no options. You got to realize that they can't keep coming to you when that way they're acting the way they are. They can't keep coming to you to bail them out. You can't keep giving them money. You can't keep paying the rent. You can't keep supporting the lifestyle. The thought is, well, if I don't support them, they might die. Well, listen, I've got many friends that have died in their mom's house. So they can die from an overdose on the streets or they can die in the house. They're going to do what they want to do, but ultimately, the only thing they can control, the loved ones, is what they do. I can't control what an addict does, but I can control how I support him and what I do. So I would just shrink their world. Tell them, man, here's what I'll support you in. You want to get in treatment, I'll find every way to get you into treatment. You want to get help with counseling, I'll find any way to get you help with counseling, but I'm not doing anything else until you're willing to change.
That is tough love. It is very difficult for some of us, but we must be discerning to know what is appropriate help, but we've not crossed the line into enabling that behavior. Yeah. Pastor, maybe bring this in for a landing for us. There may be two types of people listening right now. They're captivated by what you're saying. It might be the person who is, as you described earlier, I'm not sure where I fit. I'm not sure that I have very many friends. I have a low confidence, low self-esteem, and so forth. You may, based on your background, assess that person as having the propensity to engage in or make decisions that he or she should not because of their strong need for acceptance and identity. There may be another person who says that, well, I am addicted. I need help, but those of us on the outside don't know exactly how to help. Can you address a call to action for either of those two? And the two different actions may be different. And I do understand, and I think many of our listeners do, there's not necessarily one solution that will fit everybody. But I think what I'm taking from what you're saying is, come on, folks, we must engage. We must care about those that have the propensity to live a life that you came through.
Yeah, I think so. I think one, let me just be clear. I'm not a professional. I'm not a doctor. But I have learned some things from being out there and going through it myself. And I think, hey, if you're listening and you constantly find yourself doing things to try to fit in, if you're constantly trying something new, if you're constantly feeling the need to buy clothes so that you can fit in, if you find yourself drinking more than others and you're trying to live in the party atmosphere, you can't stop things that you realize that maybe aren't completely destructive, but just aren't good for you. You have this obsessive compulsive behavior, then you may have a propensity to fall into, strong addictive behaviors. And here's what I would say is I'm a big proponent of the local church for many reasons. And I'd find a good local church. I'd get around some men. I'd see if they have a recovery program. The church I'm part of has a recovery program called Celebrate Recovery, and it's a 12-step program. And what's nice about it is that it deals with hurts, habits, and hang-ups. So it isn't just like, say, NA or AA, of which I'm part of NA, that is just focusing on substances. It deals with all kinds of, codependency, shopping, all that. But I would tell them to get into a local church where you can get around some guys that maybe, have been there, done that. That's the biggest thing, because, those with addictive behaviors like myself, if we're left to our own demise, we'll believe our own lies, okay? So we need other people in our lives to help us know if what we're thinking is right. And just getting in with a group that's healthy, not perfect, but healthy and wanting to put into you, that's where I would go if I was that person. Also, look, I'm a big fan of counseling. I still see my therapist on a regular basis. Man, it's just God put him in my life, and he's kind of helps me talk about facts and feelings a lot during our appointments, and he helps me see facts more than I let my feelings run my life. So I think those are two good things. Get with a group of people that'll help you and put into your life, and then maybe get in with a therapist that can help you as well navigate life. I think if you really believe that you have addictive behaviors, then, man, you reach out to someone like me, and usually if we're using or have addictive behaviors, we're probably around people that we know can help us out. You can always reach out to your local health department. Local church, like I said, usually has someone who's been there, done that, can help you out, because it won't get any better until you treat the disease. I tell people all the time, Ron, I've never had to convince someone who had cancer to get cancer treatment. But yet this disease here, it is so hard to help, the people, we want to fight. No, I don't need that, but it's a disease that lies to you and says you don't need any help, and that's why we stay out there so long. So get help as soon as you can. I think for those listening that are close to someone who has it, hey, what do? I think, like I said earlier, you shrink their world, and you love them enough to say, hey, I'm not gonna be part of this destructive behavior. You look for some resources in your town, 12-step programs, treatment facilities, mental health facilities, and local churches that are willing to help, and you give them that information. Ultimately, you can't make them do it. They've got to want it. But what you can do is resource them so that you did resource them. And then the other thing is, I tell, there might be some family members that are listening that have been doing this with a person with addictive behavior a long time. Guess what? You've gotten sick with them as well. And even while they may not be willing to get help, you need to get help as a family member or friend, because you don't realize, but you've gotten sick and unhealthy along with that person, and you should get therapy. You should go talk to someone. That way you can get recentered and get strong. That way, when that person does finally want to get help, you're at a better, healthier place, and then you can help create healthy boundaries in your relationship with them.
That is great wisdom, Pastor. For those listening, I would like to make myself available to point people in different directions for help. I am aware that there are many programs available for basic education purposes on helping those to overcome the disease of addiction. I'm generally aware of the 12-step program. I am aware of the Celebrate Recovery that is available through Oak Ridge Baptist Church and some other churches. So, Pastor, I think my encouragement is, and you're in a better position to do this, is just get engaged, folks. Have compassion for others. Do whatever you have to do to get between yourself and the person who has the propensity to become addicted, and just engage in people's lives very effectively, such that the overriding characteristic is, I care about you and your health. I'm not here to demean you or stigmatize you or label you, but I care enough that I don't want for you to continue the way you are. And, Pastor, as you said, after that, it's up to you. If you accept that, you can't make someone do something they're not willing to do.
That is correct. I think you hit it on the head. And for those listening, Celebrate Recovery, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Hey, those are not limited to one area. If you go on the website, you can find the national website for all three of those, for NA, AA, and Celebrate Recovery. And there's meetings in any town, generally in any state, because it's a nationwide program. So I encourage people to check their websites out for themselves if they need it, or, if they want to pass that information on to loved ones.
Pastor, thank you for your heart. Thank you that God chose to not give up on you. He doesn't give up on anyone. He's working in your life, and you're passing your life experiences forward.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. And I appreciate what you're doing, the part you're playing to help others. It's much needed, and I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, brother.
What are your thoughts about substance abuse disease? Do you have anyone in your family? Have you? Or is there anyone within your circle of influence who has overcome or might have the propensity to engage in the disease of substance abuse? Let's engage together. Let's reach out to help others who may have an underlying problem, may have a personality attribute that is indicative of the propensity that someone could engage in substance abuse. As Pastor Lloyd very eloquently described, his problem was symptomatic of a larger problem of not knowing where to fit, acceptance, identity. There may be others in your circle of influence who have the same type symptoms and need intervention from someone who's very caring, very discerning. Let us know what your thoughts are. Have you encountered that? Have you had a very positive or negative experience? Either way, we'd like to work together and be a catalyst to help overcome this period of time where COVID is increasingly a reason for some people to go into isolation, which then sometimes results in a substance abuse disease and addiction to that. But let's work together. Let's identify some traits that have worked for you. Let's identify some things that have not worked for you. But let's work together to be very effective in caring for other people, intervening in a very positive way. Relationships, mentoring, accountability partners, all of these are things that are very meaningful to a person who wants to be accepted, wants to have a life where they can overcome anything of any shortcomings of feelings of inadequacy, not being accepted. They want more meaning in life. Let's help those people overcome those type of challenges. Coaching is one discipline that can help a person overcome any life experiences, things they have been told, a period of life where they feel that they have been inadequate personally or things just did not come together. Sometimes these life factors have an adverse influence in the subconscious such that what is in the subconscious tends to become ruling a dominant factor in a person's life if we're not aware of those things that are in our life. Coaching can help resolve some of these factors, help us to become aware of some of the factors that are in our life, and we learn how to cope with or manage these adverse factors. Let's work together. Marty and I are certified coaches. We would like to work with you and help you or those within your circle of influence, your loved ones, who have any type of life challenges to where they may feel inadequate. They are dominated by any thoughts of the past that have been said to or about them, anything that is keeping a person from operating, functioning at their full performance level. So let's work together and let's share ideas. Call us at 410-586-1875 or contact us by way of email, ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, @thecooperculture.com. If you would like to get in touch with Pastor Bryan Lloyd and share experiences with him, contact us and let us know he has offered to work with you in any capacity of sharing his life experience that would add value to you and anyone else. The 12-Step Program, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous are all programs that are designed to help people overcome various life challenges, addiction, addictive behavior, and anything of that nature that would keep a person from using these type things to overcome what is a larger symptomatic problem. Let's work together. Let's engage with others. Let's help others to be the person that God designed them to be, to live at their full performance. We look forward to working with you.